The talk, to be hosted at the Vancouver Public Library Central Branch in January by Meghan Murphy, is billed as a discussion on gender identity, ideology and women's rights. But Murphy's past writing on her Feminist blog has upset many who say her ideas on gender identity are hurtful. She disagrees.
Feminists are not going around attacking trans people. We would never do that. We're not against trans-identified people. Again, we're just trying to have this conversation.
Murphy has been permanently banned from Twitter, she says, for a new policy that bans something called deadnaming, referring to someone by the incorrect gender.
What does it mean to be transgender? How does a man become a woman? How does a person change sex? What is a trans woman? You know, I feel like these are basic questions that I want to talk about. I want to understand because I find this conversation and this ideology really incoherent.
One of the more vocal opponents of the scheduled event at the library is the group Community, an LGBTQ community center.
I would say that her banning from Twitter was about much more than deadnaming. It's about words that contribute to a climate of hatred, discrimination, violence, and fear on the part of trans people.
The chief librarian has responded saying, "We recognize that Meghan Murphy's opinions are concerning. However, VPL is not in a position to take action intended to censor speech that is otherwise permissible under Canadian law. We have no indication that the event on January 10th will include content that violates the criminal code."
Although I find it despicable and it's not something I support at all, part of living in a free society is the right to free speech as well. So if it was classified as a hate crime officially, then of course we would take different actions, but at this point I've been apprised it doesn't, so the talk will go ahead.
Jill Bennett, Global News.
A controversial blogger is in Vancouver tonight, one that's been banned from Twitter. Meghan Murphy talks a lot about transgender issues. She has a lot of supporters, and tonight a whole lot of protesters too. Our Penny Daflos is at the library tonight, and Penny, you got an earful from both sides.
Well, sure did. Some people see Murphy as a hate monger who shouldn't be allowed to spread her ideas, and others see her as a feminist role model who's speaking up in a new era of gender identity.
Stand up, fight back. Our friends and neighbors are under attack by hyper-focusing on trans.
A big crowd of protesters gathered outside the library in support of the trans community in protest of the event titled Gender Identity, Ideology and Women's Rights. Supporters came from as far as the U.S., with both Murphy supporters and detractors fired up about the debate.
Law to discriminate or to ask for special discrimination or to say, yeah, but not those people are freaks, that is not allowed in Canada in 2019.
She believes in giving women real rights and not paying attention to people who aren't real women claiming to be real women, and it's important to stand up for real women like me and like you.
It is a controversial subject, and it does, it is a touchy subject that is difficult for, to talk about or for people to discuss, because people's emotions are really intense around this.
Murphy garnered applause from the sold-out crowd, thanking them for not being bullied from showing up. She defended her views, including that trans athletes shouldn't compete against, quote, biological women, and that women's change rooms should only be for natural-born women.
I think that women's spaces and programs can be protected. I also think that trans-identified people really need services and programs that are specific to them. It doesn't have to be all one thing. I don't think that it's necessary to say that people who identify as trans women are literally female, because they're not, and that's not an insult, that's not a judgment, this is just true. You can't change biological sex.
One thing both sides seem to have in common is anger at the library. The event, Murphy is frustrated the event had to be held after hours. It's just wrapping up right now. There's still police on scene just in case things got out of control. Protesters are angry that she was allowed to use any space here at all. In the past, the library has said that while they disagree with Murphy's opinions, quote, the fundamental role of libraries as a place for free speech and intellectual freedom must be upheld. St. John?
Yeah, good point. Sort of caught in a rock and a hard place there. Okay, Penny, thanks so much. Good night, Penny.
The Vancouver Public Library has been thrust into the spotlight over allowing a controversial speaker, and LGBTQ2 groups don't like it.
The library would be a safe space. We would never second guess that the Vancouver Public Library would host someone who publicly, tries to deny the existence of transgender people.
Gender does not mean male or female.
Meghan Murphy, a self-described radical feminist, has been banned from Twitter for questioning whether people can change their biological sex. She argues men aren't women and wants to hold a discussion about it.
What does it mean to be transgender? How does a man become a woman? How does a person change sex? What is a trans woman? I feel like these are basic questions that I want to talk about.
The library did initially agree to an interview with Global News, but demanded we provide the questions in advance, which is a violation of our journalistic policy, in line with many news organizations. The chief librarian then abruptly canceled and issued this statement. This is an incredibly difficult situation and one that public libraries struggle with every day.
It's difficult emotionally. It's not difficult legally.
The BC Civil Liberties Association is on board with the library.
The library is doing exactly the right thing here. Their mandate is intellectual freedom, and that includes very controversial topics.
There were calls to cancel speaking engagements by University of Toronto professor Jordan Peterson, who voiced opposition to adding gender identity or expression to the Canadian Human Rights Act. But the show went on.
If we all retreat into our bubbles, into our silos, we'll never have agreement across issues, we'll never have discussion across issues, and we need to do that.
But this advocate says the line between freedom of expression and hate has been blurred.
If someone said Jewish people don't exist or don't have the right to be there, they wouldn't be allowed to speak. So it's very different in terms of what society will currently allow versus what should actually be, and what's really considered hate speech.
The police will be at the event to keep protesters in check and make sure Canada's hate crimes aren't violated. Robin Gill, Global News, Vancouver.